My name is Jody, a 32-year-old lawyer with a life that, from the outside, seems like a fairy tale. I come from a family that's pretty well off, and I've known Ethan, the guy I'm supposed to marry, since we were kids. Our dads are old buddies who used to joke about us tying the knot one day. I remember one summer evening, during one of our family's joint dinners, our fathers brought up the topic again. I was about 10, and Ethan was 13. Ethan's dad, Mr. Thompson, laughed heartily and said, "Mark my words, Ethan, one day you'll marry Jody here, and our companies will be stronger for it." My dad joined in, chuckling, "Absolutely, John. These two will unite our legacies." I remember blushing furiously. Ethan just rolled his eyes and mumbled, "As if I'd ever marry a kid." Back then, I was head over heels for Ethan. But he always saw me as the annoying little girl who followed him around. Despite his attitude, I couldn't help but nurture a small hope that one day, he'd see me differently. Years passed, and we both pursued our own paths. I dived into law, and Ethan became a hotshot financier in his father's company. Our paths rarely crossed, but I always kept tabs on him, my childhood crush never really fading away. During college, our families met less frequently, but the marriage joke continued. At a Thanksgiving dinner when I was 22, Mr. Thompson nudged Ethan and said, "So, Ethan, when are you going to make an honest woman out of Jody?" Ethan, who had had a bit too much to drink, replied loudly, "Fine. If Jody isn't married by 32, and I'm still single, I'll marry her. Happy now?" Everyone laughed, but I felt a strange mix of hope and embarrassment. The thought that Ethan might one day be my husband lingered in my mind like a stubborn perfume. I dated a bit after that, but nothing serious. Part of me always compared every guy to Ethan, and they all fell short. As for Ethan, he was seen with various women over the years, never settling down. I remember the day Ethan proposed like it was yesterday. It was a typical Tuesday evening, and I had just returned from a long day at the law firm. I was exhausted, my mind still buzzing with the day's cases, when I found Ethan waiting for me at my apartment. "Hey, Jody." He greeted me casually, as if it was normal for him to be there. "Ethan? What are you doing here?" I asked, surprised. He shrugged. "Thought I'd drop by. We need to talk." My heart raced. "We need to talk," those words never meant anything good in my experience. "Sure, let's talk. Is everything all right?" I tried to sound calm, but my voice betrayed a hint of nervousness. Ethan took a deep breath. "Look, you know the promise I made years ago? About marrying you if we're both still single at 32. "Yeah," I replied, a lump forming in my throat. I wasn't sure where this was going. "Well, I'm a man of my word. So, here." He pulled out a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple, yet elegant ring. "Will you marry me, Jody?" I was stunned. This wasn't the proposal I had dreamed of, but it was Ethan, and that was all that mattered. "Yes, Ethan, I will," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. He slid the ring onto my finger, and that was it. No hug, no kiss, just a nod from him. "We should tell our parents. They'll be thrilled," he said, already reaching for his phone. I nodded, still processing what had just happened. This was it. I was going to marry Ethan. The next few days were a whirlwind. Our families met for dinner to celebrate the engagement. "Ethan, I can't tell you how happy this makes me," Mr. Thompson said, clapping Ethan on the back. "Yeah, it's great," Ethan replied, his tone flat. My dad raised his glass. "To Jody and Ethan, may this union bring happiness and prosperity to both our families." "To Jody and Ethan," everyone echoed. The dinner was filled with laughter and plans for the future. Everyone was excited, talking about the wedding and how perfect it was for the two families to unite at last. But as I sat there, listening to them, I couldn't help but feel like a bystander in my own life. This was everything I had ever wanted, so why did it feel so hollow? But then, another part of me argued that this was Ethan, the man I had loved all my life. Maybe, with time, he would come to love me. Give it a chance, Jody, I whispered to myself. Maybe this is the start of something wonderful. I closed my eyes, trying to convince myself that everything would be all right. That this marriage, this union of two families, would somehow turn into the love story I had always dreamed of. The civil ceremony was a quiet affair, just our immediate families and a few close friends. Ethan's dad, Mr. Thompson, got teary-eyed as we exchanged vows. "Never thought I'd see the day," he said, wiping his eyes. My parents were beaming, and for a moment, I allowed myself to feel a bit of happiness. After the civil ceremony, the real challenge began, planning the grand wedding. We decided on a 2-month timeline, which meant I had my work cut out for me. I dove into the preparations headfirst, hoping it would distract me from my doubts. One evening, I was sitting with a mountain of bridal magazines, trying to pick a theme for the wedding. Ethan walked in, late from work as usual. "Hey," I said, looking up. "What do you think about a vintage theme for the wedding?" Ethan glanced at the magazines and then at me. "Whatever you want, Jody. It's your day." I felt a twinge of disappointment at his indifference. "But it's our day," I protested softly. He sighed. "I'm beat, Jody. Just pick whatever you like. I'm sure it'll be great." He then walked away, leaving me alone with my magazines. I shook off the feeling of rejection and continued with the plans. Dress shopping was next on my list. I invited my mom and Ethan's mom, Mrs. Thompson, to join me. At the bridal shop, I tried on dress after dress, but nothing felt right. My mom was getting impatient. "Jody, they all look beautiful. Just pick one." Mrs. Thompson was more understanding. "Take your time, dear. It's a big decision." Finally, I found the perfect dress. It was elegant and simple, just what I had always imagined. "This is the one," I said, looking at myself in the mirror. Both moms agreed, and we celebrated with a small lunch. Mrs. Thompson brought up the topic of Ethan. "He's always been a bit reserved. Don't take it to heart, dear." I nodded, but her words didn't provide much comfort. The weeks flew by, and the wedding day was fast approaching. I was in the midst of choosing cakes and finalizing the guest list when I realized I hadn't seen much of Ethan. He was always at work or too tired to discuss anything when he was home. As the wedding day neared, I felt more like a wedding planner than a bride. My excitement was replaced by a sense of loneliness and a growing realization that maybe this marriage was more about convenience than love. But I pushed those thoughts aside. I had to focus on the wedding. Maybe, after the wedding, things would change. Maybe Ethan would be different. The day my world came crashing down started like any other. I was at work, buried under a mountain of case files, when a sudden wave of nausea hit me. I hadn't been feeling well all morning, so I decided to head home early. I pulled up to our house, noticing Ethan's car in the driveway. That was odd, he was never home this early. Quietly, I unlocked the front door, not wanting to startle him. Maybe he was sick too, I thought. As I stepped inside, I heard Ethan's voice coming from the living room. He was on the phone. Curiosity got the better of me, and I tiptoed closer. "No, baby, I can't wait to see you tonight," Ethan said, his voice soft and affectionate. My heart skipped a beat. Who was he talking to? I pressed myself against the wall, listening intently. "Yeah, marrying Jody is a pain, but it's worth it. Once I get control of the companies, we'll be set. Don't worry, after she pops out a kid, I'll dump her," he continued. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. This couldn't be happening. The room spun around me as I struggled to process his words. "Yeah, she's clueless. Thinks I actually love her," he chuckled. That chuckle, so cold and cruel, shattered the last bit of hope I had. I couldn't listen anymore. I stumbled back to the front door, my mind racing. I needed to get out of there, to breathe. As I slammed the door shut behind me, I heard Ethan call out, Jody? Is that you? I didn't look back. I got into my car and drove. I didn't know where I was going, I just needed to be away from that house, away from Ethan. I ended up at a park, sitting on a bench, watching families and couples around me, oblivious to my world falling apart. How could I have been so blind? How could I not see what Ethan really was? I had to make a decision. Confronting Ethan was the obvious choice, but what then? Cause a scene, break off the engagement, and be the talk of our families and friends? Or play along, keep my dignity, and figure out what to do next? As the sun set, I made up my mind. I wasn't going to let Ethan see how much he had hurt me. I would play his game, for now, but on my terms. I had to be smart about this. I drove home, my face a mask of calm. Ethan was waiting for me, a concerned look on his face. "Where were you?" "I was worried," he said, coming towards me. "I wasn't feeling well, just needed some fresh air." I lied smoothly. He nodded. "Okay, well, I'm here now. Let's have dinner." I forced a smile. "Sure, that sounds great." As we sat eating, I looked at Ethan, really looked at him. This was the man I had loved my whole life, and now, he was nothing but a stranger to me. That night, as Ethan slept beside me, I lay awake, my mind racing with plans and possibilities. One thing was clear, I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. Ethan had no idea who he was dealing with. Lying next to Ethan that night, I couldn't shake off the mix of anger and betrayal boiling inside me. I needed to know more, to understand the extent of his deceit. Quietly, I reached for his phone on the nightstand. My hands were trembling as I unlocked it, thank goodness for easy-to-guess passwords. I opened his messages and there it was, a string of texts with someone named Julia. My heart raced as I scrolled through their conversations. They were planning to meet the night before our wedding, in our house. An extreme date, in the presence of a sleeping wife is exactly what they called their plan. So that I wouldn't disturb them, they planned to give me strong sleeping pills. The audacity of it made my blood boil. "Ethan, you bastard," I muttered under my breath. I heard him stir and quickly place the phone back, pretending to be asleep. My mind was racing with thoughts of revenge. I couldn't let them get away with this. I needed a plan, something to turn the tables on Ethan and his mistress. The next morning, I acted as if nothing had happened. Ethan was his usual self, indifferent and preoccupied with work. I kissed him, goodbye, and watched him leave for the office. Once he was gone, I sat down with a cup of coffee, thinking about my next move. I decided to reach out to an old friend from law school, Mike. He was now a private investigator and could be the key to gathering the evidence I needed against Ethan. I met Mike at a small cafe downtown. He looked concerned when I told him about Ethan's betrayal. "Jody, I'm so sorry. What do you need me to do?" he asked. "I need evidence, Mike. Photos, texts, anything that can prove what he's up to," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Mike nodded. "Consider it done. I'll get you everything you need." "Thank you, Mike. I can't let him get away with this," I replied, feeling a sense of empowerment for the first time since I heard Ethan's conversation. That evening, Ethan came home late again. We sat down for dinner, the tension between us palpable. "Is everything okay, Jody? You seem distant," Ethan said, his eyes not meeting mine. I forced a smile, just tired from wedding planning. "You know how it is." He nodded. "Yeah, I guess. Listen, I'll be working late tomorrow night. Don't wait up for me." I felt a flash of anger but kept my composure. "Sure, no problem. Work comes first, right?" He didn't detect the sarcasm in my voice. "Exactly. Glad you understand." As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't help but think about how blind I had been. Ethan never loved me. It was all a lie, a means to an end for him. But I wasn't going to be a pawn in his game any longer. I had Mike gathering evidence, and soon I'd have enough to expose Ethan for the fraud he was. But that wasn't enough. I wanted him to feel the humiliation and betrayal I felt. I started planning the ultimate revenge in my mind, a way to turn the tables and leave Ethan with nothing. He thought he was playing me, but he had no idea what was coming for him. The eve of our wedding arrived with a heavy air of anticipation. Ethan seemed more on edge than usual, but I pretended not to notice. I was too focused on my plan, the final act of this tragic play. Ethan came home early, which was unusual. He was carrying a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. "Thought we could celebrate our last night as an unmarried couple," he said with a forced smile. I played along, hiding my contempt. "That sounds lovely," I replied, mustering a smile. As he poured the champagne, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the moment he'd try to drug me, as per his plan with Julia. We clinked glasses, and I brought the champagne to my lips, pretending to sip while actually letting it run down the side of my mouth. Ethan didn't notice, he was too busy texting under the table. Probably Julia, I thought bitterly. After a few minutes, I feigned dizziness. "Ethan, I'm not feeling so well. I think I need to lie down." He looked up, satisfaction flashing in his eyes for a moment. "Oh, okay. Do you need any help?" "No, I'll be fine. Just need some rest," I said, standing up shakily. As I made my way to the bedroom, I heard Ethan make a phone call. "She's out. You can come over now," he whispered. My heart raced. This was it. My plan was about to unfold. Once in the bedroom, I quietly locked the door and slipped under the covers, pretending to be asleep. I heard the front door open and close a while later, and then low voices coming from the living room. Ethan and Julia, no doubt. I waited for what felt like hours, my body tense with anticipation. Then, I made my move. I grabbed my phone and called both our parents, whispering a quick lie about a surprise for them at the house. "Mom, Dad, you need to come over right now. I have a surprise for Ethan and I want you to be part of it," I said, my voice trembling with feigned excitement. "Really, honey? At this hour?" "Okay, we'll be right there," my mom replied, confused but intrigued. I made the same call to Ethan's parents, ensuring that everyone would arrive at the same time. Then, I sat in the dark, waiting for the moment of truth. The sound of the doorbell broke the silence of the night. I heard footsteps and then voices of confusion and anger. I slipped out of bed and made my way to the living room. The scene before me was one of chaos. Ethan and Julia, caught in a compromising position, our parents standing in the doorway, shocked and appalled. "What the hell is this, Ethan?" Mr. Thompson roared, his face red with anger. Ethan was speechless, his eyes wide with shock. Julia was scrambling to cover herself, looking around frantically. I stepped into the room, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. "Surprise," I said, my voice cold. The confrontation was intense. Accusations flew, tears were shed, and the truth came out in the ugliest way. Ethan tried to explain, but his words fell on deaf ears. As the reality of the situation sank in, I felt a strange sense of relief. The charade was over. I was free from the lies and deceit. I watched as Ethan's world crumbled around him. He had lost everything in one fell swoop, his family, his reputation, and any future he might have had with me. The aftermath of Ethan's betrayal left the house in a haunting silence. As I sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the cold coffee before me, my mind was a battleground of emotions. The dramatic revelation had left me reeling, but also ignited a flame of determination within. I spent the next few days in a flurry of activity. Meetings with my lawyer, going over the evidence Mike, the private detective, had gathered. The photos of Ethan with Julia, their intimate texts, and the damning correspondence where they planned to drug me with a powerful sleeping pill, it was all there. Ethan attempted to reach out several times, but I ignored his calls and messages. There was nothing left to say to him. On the day of the court hearing, I donned my sharpest suit, a symbol of the new, unyielding woman I had become. Walking into the courtroom, I saw Ethan, a shell of the confident man he once was. The hearing was intense. My lawyer presented the evidence with clinical precision. Ethan's lawyer tried to defend, but the proof was irrefutable. After the hearing, Ethan approached me, a look of desperation in his eyes. "Jody, please, can we talk?" he implored. I faced him, the man who had shattered my trust. "What's left to say, Ethan?" My voice was calm but laced with disdain. I'm sorry, Jody. I never thought it would go this far," he stammered. "Sorry isn't good enough." "You made your choices, Ethan," I replied, turning my back on him. Over the following months, the legal battle raged on, but my resolve never wavered. The evidence was damning, and eventually, justice was served. Ethan was ordered to pay a significant sum for emotional damages. Leaving the courtroom for the last time, a wave of relief washed over me. I had stood up to Ethan and emerged victorious. That chapter of my life was closed. I was ready to move forward, stronger and more resilient. Ethan was now a part of my past, a difficult chapter, but one that had taught me the strength I possessed. Walking out of the courthouse, the final gavel still ringing in my ears, marked more than just a legal victory. It was the end of a chapter, a painful saga that had changed me in ways I never imagined. As I stepped into the sunlight, a sense of liberation enveloped me, the chains of my past finally broken. I didn't head home immediately. Instead, I found solace in a quaint park, a place that once held memories of Ethan and me. Now, it symbolized a fresh start. Sitting on an old bench, basking in the warmth of the sun, I pondered over the recent events. My phone vibrated with a message from my friend Lisa. "You're a rock star, Jody. Ready to celebrate your freedom?" I smiled, replying, "Absolutely. Just need a moment to myself first." "Take your time, girl. We'll party when you're up for it," she responded. As I sat there, lost in thought, I was approached by an elderly woman. "You're Jody, right?" I was in the courtroom. "What you did, standing up for yourself, was incredibly brave," she said softly. Her words touched a deep chord within me. "Thank you. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary," I replied, feeling a swell of pride. "You've inspired me, dear," she said before walking away, leaving me with a sense of purpose and strength. That evening, a small celebration with close friends marked the beginning of a new era. Laughter and cheers filled the air as we toasted to new beginnings. The next day brought an unexpected turn. While out for a walk, I received a call from Ethan. His voice was desperate, a stark contrast to the confident man I once knew. "Jody, please, I need your help," he pleaded. "What's wrong, Ethan?" I asked, although I had a guess. "My father, after everything that came out, he's considering kicking me out of the company and disinheriting me. You have to talk to him, convince him not to." Ethan's voice cracked with desperation. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Karma had caught up with him. "Ethan, what you're asking? I can't do that. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences," I said calmly. "But Jody, I have nothing left. Please, I'm begging you," he implored. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of empowerment. "No, Ethan. It's time for you to face the music. Goodbye." I hung up, cutting off any further pleas. Walking back home, I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. Ethan's downfall was a result of his own actions, and I no longer bore any responsibility for his fate. In the following weeks, I threw myself into work and rekindled old hobbies. Friends and family surrounded me, their support unwavering. Life was moving forward, and so was I. One evening, as I relaxed with a book, a realization dawned on me: I was content. The turmoil of the past had given way to peace, and for the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely happy. The journey had been tumultuous, filled with betrayal and heartache, but it had also taught me resilience and self-worth. I had stood up for myself, sought justice, and emerged stronger.